Hello everyone. Apologies for the fact that I've been away for quite a long time. I haven't done any videos for months and months and months. But I'm back and I'm going to be doing quite a lengthy video series going forwards. I'm currently recording this during a bit of a heat wave. It is absolutely roasting here today. So I'm in the coolest room of the house, even though that looks like the sun above me. And it is sweltering, absolutely sweltering. But anyway, I wanted to start a new video series, and I decided to focus on the author Bentley Little. And the reason I wanted to focus on the author Bentley Little is for a few reasons. Number one, he's written some of my very favourite horror works of all time. I think he is a phenomenally underrated and underappreciated writer of bizarre and often surreal horror. But number two is the fact that he's also a horror author who goes underneath the radar for many people. He doesn't really have a social media presence. He doesn't really have much of an online presence at all, other than through his publisher, Cemetery Dance. I think it used to be Signet who did all his books, but Cemetery Dance have been doing it for the last decade plus. And he's the sort of author who's very hard to miss. And I haven't found... I mean, the internet itself has very few resources on Bentley Little. There are a couple of reviews here and there of books. Some sites have got 3 or 4 or even 5 books on there, but there's nowhere on the internet that has covered his entire collection of work. And that's what I'm aiming to do over a video series, cover Bentley Little's entire collection of work so that you're familiar with pretty much everything he's done, both in the original Signet releases and the new Cemetery Dance releases. Now, the vast majority of books I have of Bentley Little's are mass market paperbacks from Signet. And they're quite hard to get a hold of now. They're not in production anymore. Probably worth a fair bit. I've even got one signed, and I'll be showing that through the through as we go through there. I've got a bit of a story that involves SpongeBob SquarePants, of all things. It's connected to Bentley Little. Little fun fact that you might find. Well, I'll tell you about when we get to it. But fun fact. And I've got a couple of the larger edition paperbacks and a couple of Kindle books. So I won't be showing them all, but I'll be going through as many as I can. At the point of recording this, I'm still going through a couple of Bentley Little books. There's a few that I haven't read yet, but I'm going through them. By the time this series ends, I will have read them and reviewed them. And whereas with Richard Lehman and James Herbert, I did a ranking from worst to best, I am going to do that with Bentley Little at the very end, but because I've still got a few books to read as I go through this, what I'm going to do is just review them in random order of release, just whichever one I feel like reviewing at the time. So you'll get a whole gamut of books, from good ones, bad ones, ones in the middle. And when I get to the end, I'll then do a conventional ranking. And instead of being 30 videos long, that will probably be 1 or 2 videos whereby I go through it in rapid fire fashion, just from worst to best, to sum up and end the Bentley Little reviews. I think it's worth pointing out with Bentley Little, he's a really interesting author. I came across Bentley Little through the bookstore in the UK, Waterstones, because I'd pretty much finished reading all of the Richard Lehman books that I could get my hands on, or that at least I wanted at that time to read. And there was another author whose surname started with an L, Bentley Little, there were 2 books of his. There was The Summoning and there was The Revelation. And I got those books and then started a hunt for his other works. I discovered those books via online stores. Bentley Little was the first author whose works I purchased online. Many years ago, when dinosaurs were on the earth. And he's something that I've stuck with because there's something very odd about Bentley Little's writing that I find very appealing. So his stories, he tends to write 2 different types of story. The first type are, for all intents and purposes, social satire stories. They're about some form of institutes or for example, about an apartment store, about a university, an academy, the postal service, driving school. They're always about some form of institution that he wants to talk about, but he'll impose his views in a satirical way over a story of a horror book. The other style of work that he does are all his others that are effectively ghosts or monsters or spirits or demons or something like that, that aren't poking fun at some form of conglomeration. They're more about just some sort of random thing. And I think he handles both of these avenues really well. I'm going to start with some negatives really for Bentley. He's a very limited writer in that most of his characters are effectively himself. They're almost always people who have the same likes and tastes and interests as Bentley Little. So they tend to be fans of classic rock. They tend to not like any form of conformity. They tend to love art, classic films, that sort of thing. He isn't great in the same way that Stephen King is great at writing lots of different great characters or coming up with fantastic, innovative, original characters or anything like that. His character designs are often very thin. Often they're not even described. They're just characters that exist. And his stories are quite similar in structure. So if he's talking about a housing association or a driving school or a university, whilst the name of the thing itself is different, the actual story itself will be much the same. As it is with a lot of his other individual books, there's not a great deal of variety. And as a result of that, he's quite hard to read in the same way that Richard Lehman or James Herbert are easy to read, in that all their stories are predominantly different and they've got a lot of ideas. Bentley Little isn't like that. His stories are all very similar in a way. However, they are tackled in a way that is... He basically takes everyday, mundane, normal things and makes them weird and often just downright creepy. There's a real sense of menace and unease in the best of Bentley Little's works, and the satirical element also plays very well in what he does as well. And I find them extremely easy for the most part to read and to like. Because they're often really surreal. There's the stuff that he comes up with that no other horror author comes up with that just make the story bizarre, but often genuinely creepy at his best. He's different again, and it's going to be interesting when I do the ranking of his stuff, that whereas Richard Lehman and James Herbert had what I would say arcs or periods where they wrote their best stuff, Bentley Little doesn't. He will write amazing stuff and then write awful stuff back to back, and then it could be amazing. And so you never know what you're going to get with Bentley Little. It could be great, it could be awful. It's rarely in between. Most of his stuff is either good or it isn't. And it's a real lottery with him as to what you're going to come up with, which makes reading his stuff interesting. Some of his worst books are absolutely awful, but his best books are absolutely fantastic. And I think and I hope that by doing this, I'm going to not only bring Bentley Little to light to a few people who follow me who may never have heard of him, but we'll go through all of his books in some degree of fashion. And then, like I say, when I do the ranking, whilst there's a lot of books you could ignore and not bother with, certainly the top 10, you're going to want to add, hopefully, if you're a fan of horror and surreal horror, that to your collection. And my real aim here is to provide, firstly, the most comprehensive and insightful, I hope, database or reviews of Bentley Little's work that's out there, but also to provide those people who've never heard of him with another horror author that they can discover. Whereas Richard Lehman, who's kind of fallen out of fashion a bit over the recent years, I've done every one of his main books and championed him for his best stuff. And James Herbert was a huge name anyway. Bentley Little isn't, and I'd like more people to read his stuff. It's one of the reasons why I haven't tackled Stephen King or Dean Koontz yet, because I will be covering their books, but only my favourites, not all of their stuff, because A, they've published so much stuff it would take forever to get through, but also B, they're such big name authors that there's really no need for me to add too much to what they've done, because there's 1,000 outlets out there that are far better. So That's going to be it for this introduction of Bentley Little. So stick around. This is going to last probably a good couple of months. So if you're not interested in Bentley Little, you're not going to be interested in any of this. But I hope that you are, and I hope that you stick around. And I hope that if just one person watching this discovers Bentley Little and through these videos purchases a book or several books or gets into Bentley Little in the same way with the same passion that I've had, that's a great thing. That's worth me doing this, because he's really a unique author that doesn't get talked about as much in horror circles as he should. And like I say, whilst he has produced some clunkers, his absolute best stuff is phenomenal. So that'll do it for an intro. I'm going to have a bit more on Bentley as we go through each book in turn. I'll add a few more personal things and a few facts. Like I say, I've got some interesting stories to tell about Bentley Little as we go through. But we'll start off with the first book, whichever one that may be, in the very next video.